Sam McIntosh is an Australian Paralympic athlete who's with us here just now. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Toby. Thanks for having me on the show.
Great, it's great to have you here. So, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the sports that you've competed in the Paralympics and beyond?
I guess I grew up in a reasonably sporty family, so I was always had an interest in sport. I was never necessarily interested in athletics, which is what I've gone on to do in my entire life. I think the idea of going around circles didn't quite make sense to me from a young age. But yes, after my accident, I really fell in love with wheelchair athletics, and it's taken me to 3 different Paralympics now.
Wow. And having an accident, does that set you back a bit, or does that maybe just make you even more motivated to defy expectation?
Yeah, look, one of the things that I fell in love with athletics was the fact that it was an individual sport. It was always me versus me when I'm in the track chair, when I'm on the athletics track racing and training. Like, you only go as fast as you can push yourself. Yeah. And I think the drive to want to kind of better myself and almost, I suppose, recover after my injury is what initially was so enticing about getting into the sport. But it's something that I've continued to really love, pushing myself forward as far as I can take it.
Yeah. And what category do you come under? Because there's lots of different ones, isn't there?
Yeah, it's quite confusing if you don't know a lot about parasport and all the different classifications. So parasport, in all the different sports, there's multiple classifications, and that's to make it as even as possible. So someone with a similar ability to yourself will be able to race against that.
Yeah.
So somebody with a lot more ability than me would be a lot faster in my sport. So they'll race against people that are similar to them, and I'll race people with a similar capability and ability to myself. So I race in the T52 category, which is a quadriplegic wheelchair event category.
Yeah. Does that make it harder at the Paralympics? Because would the events take longer to complete? Because normally at the Olympics it's just men, then women, done. But then at the Paralympics, you got to do all the different categories, right?
Yeah, look, I definitely wouldn't want to be on the organising committee to try to timetable all the events. Yeah, there could be upwards of 20 to 30 of each different event on the athletics track, and that's in swimming as well. There's also a lot of categories. So it would be quite hard to timetable, and they do really squeeze them in. Yeah, it's one after the other.
Yeah. And what do you think has been your greatest achievement in your career so far?
Every time I get to represent the country is a huge achievement. But the moment that sticks out for me the most was walking into the stadium in London in 2012 for the Paralympic opening ceremony. It was my first Paralympics, and wearing the green and gold for Australia and walking in as part of a team and hearing a packed out stadium all cheering us on. There was such an emotional and huge achievement for me, and that's something that'll always stay with me.
Yeah, and of course it was announced recently that the Olympics and Paralympics will be in Brisbane in 2032, so you'll get to have your home Paralympics in 10 years' time.
I know, I'm starting to get a bit old now to think if I can carry on for another 10 years.
Yeah.
It's very enticing to be able to race at a home games. That would be very, very awesome. But I'll have to see how the body holds on.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm focusing on towards Paris in 2024 at the moment.
Yeah.
It's only 3 years away now, so we'll see how that happens first.
And how has actually COVID been? Because I guess you would have had a 5-year gap. I don't know, does that make it easier or harder? And then now you've only got a 3-year gap.
It initially made it quite difficult, having that year delay in 2020. We kind of work on a 4-year cycle. So all our training and competition leading into a major competition like a Paralympics really revolves around that cycle.
Yeah.
So it was quite disrupted, and also having to change to training in isolation. We did quite a lot of isolation here in Australia, and especially in Victoria, my home state. We were quite locked down for a very long time. So it was a huge adjustment, training in the garage. Yeah. We have stationary trainers for the racing wheelchair. So you're pushing Ks and Ks and you never quite make it to the garage door. But it was quite a challenge
Yeah.
adapting around that, but everybody was in the same boat around the world.
That's true. I guess you guys seem to have had quite a big lockdown, but then at the same time, because your lockdowns were so strict, you've been able to enjoy a lot more freedom when you're out of the lockdowns at the same time.
Yeah, it's annoying at the time, but it does have its benefits in the long run, that's for sure.
Yeah. Do you find that people are as enthusiastic about the Paralympics as they are about the Olympics?
That's something I've really noticed change, even just in my career. And I know from talking to athletes that have come from the past, we've kind of noticed as well. Like even from, I think 2012 was a huge stepping moment. There was so much publicity around that. I mean, they did such a great job bringing enthusiasm and the public over there were really eating it up. But I think worldwide and even back here in Australia, it was really noticeable, that change. And it's kind of really carried on. It was almost the beginning of kind of really bringing it into the limelight and showing people that it is as competitive and as elite of an event as the Olympics.
Yeah, that's true. And why do you think that happened, really, in London 2012, that it suddenly became a big thing then?
There's probably a few reasons for it. I think there was a lot of advertising around it. There was a lot more media representation as well. All of a sudden, networks started putting people with disabilities on programs and in advertisements. So I guess we were a lot more noticeable in the public eye.
Yeah.
And it was also a massive education push as well through schools that really got, I guess, this next generation coming through kind of aware and a lot more involved into following the sport.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And the Paralympics, I suppose, is maybe more inspirational as well, isn't it? Because everyone competing has had some sort of challenge that they've had to overcome and have probably had people tell them they're never going to be a sports person, and then look at them, they're representing the country now.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. Obviously, we want to inspire people. We want to inspire people not just with disabilities, but anyone to be able to be the best version of themselves. But it's also a bit of a balancing act of not relying too hard on that and being able to show that we are just as able and capable as our able-bodied counterparts. I think it's really a great event for really kind of shortening that gap between the two.
Yeah. And who are you outside of the Paralympics and sport? What do you like to spend your time doing when you're not doing that?
I do a lot of disability education around my community here in Geelong, which is in Victoria. I help co-found a group called Parallel Sports, which is a not-for-profit organisation to help people with physical disabilities kind of participate in grassroots sport, but also running educational events for schools and businesses as well.
Yeah. Well, where are we able to keep up to date with you if we'd like to?
Yeah, that would be awesome. Always love a follow-up. You can follow me on Instagram at Sam Sammy Sampson or on Facebook at Sam McIntosh Racing. Or if you just want to read some of my blogs and get an update about what's going on now and in the future, you can check out my website, which is sammcintosh.com.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us here today. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Toby.